Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. The British Raj was a defining chapter in India's history, lasting nearly 2 centuries from the mid-18th century until 1947. During this time, British colonial rule reshaped the political, economic, and social landscape of the Indian subcontinent in profound and lasting ways. Understanding the British Raj is crucial because it not only altered India's trajectory, but also set the stage for its struggle for independence and emergence. As a modern nation, in this video, you'll learn about how British rule began, the impact it had on India's society and economy, the resistance movements that challenged colonial power, and the legacy that continues to influence India and the world today. The story of British rule in India begins with the arrival of European traders in the early 17th century, among whom the British East India Company, EIC, quickly rose to prominence. Originally established as a trading corporation seeking profits from spices, textiles, and other goods, the company gradually expanded its influence beyond commerce. Over time, it transformed into a powerful political and military force, using diplomacy, alliances, and warfare to extend control across vast regions of India. 2 key battles marked the rise of British dominance: the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and the Battle of Buxar in 1764. At Plassey, the East India Company, led by Robert Clive, defeated the Nawab of Bengal through a combination of military strategy and political intrigue, gaining control over one of India's richest provinces. The victory at Buxar further solidified the EIC Company's power by defeating a coalition of Indian rulers, allowing it to collect revenue and govern large parts of northern India. These crucial moments transformed the East India Company from a commercial enterprise into a de facto ruler, setting the stage for nearly 2 centuries of British colonial rule. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence or the Sepoy Mutiny, was a pivotal turning point in India's colonial history. The rebellion erupted due to a mix of political, social, economic, and religious grievances. Indian soldiers, or sepoys, in the East India Company's army rose up against their British officers, fueled by resentment over unfair treatment, cultural insensitivity, and fears of forced religious conversion. The rebellion quickly spread beyond the military, involving peasants, princes, and civilians who opposed British interference in their lives and traditions. Though the rebellion was eventually suppressed with great violence by the British, it exposed the weaknesses and dangers of company rule. In response, the British government took direct control over India, dissolving the East India Company through the Government of India Act 1858. This marked the official beginning of the British Raj, with India ruled directly by the British Crown through a viceroy and a centralized administration. Under Crown rule, India experienced major political reforms, infrastructure development, and social changes, but also intensified economic exploitation and political unrest that would eventually fuel the independence movement. Under the British Raj, India was governed through a highly centralized administrative system designed to maintain British control while managing the vast and diverse subcontinent. At the top stood the viceroy, the British monarch's representative, who held supreme authority over India's governance. Below the viceroy were governors and lieutenant governors overseeing provinces, supported by a large civil service composed mainly of British officials. This bureaucracy was responsible for law enforcement, tax collection, and implementing British policies across India's vast territories. Alongside directly ruled regions were the princely states, semi-autonomous territories governed by local Indian rulers who acknowledged British supremacy. These princes retained some internal authority, but had limited independence, often relying on British advisors and agreeing to British foreign policy. This arrangement allowed the British to extend their influence indirectly while avoiding the costs of direct administration in every region. The British administration brought significant changes to Indian society and governance. They introduced Western-style education, promoting English language and modern sciences, which created a new Indian middle class and political elite. The legal system was overhauled, replacing many traditional laws with British common law principles, aiming to standardize justice but often disregarding local customs. Additionally, the British invested heavily in infrastructure, building railways, telegraphs, and canals, which facilitated trade and military movement, but primarily served colonial interests. These changes had lasting effects, shaping India's social fabric, economy, and political landscape well beyond the Raj's end. British rule brought profound economic changes to India, many of which had complex and often devastating effects. One major shift was in agriculture and land revenue systems. The British introduced policies like the permanent settlement and the Ryotwari system, which drastically altered traditional land ownership and taxation. These systems forced many Indian farmers to pay high taxes directly to the British, often leading to widespread debt and loss of land, disrupting centuries-old rural economies. At the same time, British economic policies triggered a process of deindustrialization. India had once been a global center for textile production and other crafts, but the influx of cheap, machine-made British goods devastated traditional industries. Skilled artisans and craftsmen lost their livelihoods, and many rural communities were pushed into poverty as local markets were flooded with imported products. However, the British also invested in infrastructure like railways, telegraphs, and ports, which connected distant parts of India and facilitated trade. While these developments modernized the country's transportation and communication networks, they primarily served British commercial and military interests, enabling the efficient extraction of resources and control over the vast territory. Tragically, the economic hardships under British rule contributed to recurring famines, which claimed millions of lives. These famines were often exacerbated by colonial policies that prioritized revenue collection over relief efforts, revealing the harsh realities of an economy shaped by exploitation as much as modernization. British rule brought significant social and cultural changes to India, starting with the introduction of English education. The colonial government established schools and universities that taught Western science, literature, and political ideas, creating a new class of educated Indians who became key players in social reform and the independence movement. This education system exposed Indians to ideas about democracy, human rights, and nationalism, fueling new ways of thinking about society and governance. Christian missionaries were also active during this period, aiming to spread Christianity and Western values. Their efforts had a complex impact. While they provided education and healthcare, they also challenged traditional Indian religious practices and sometimes provoked resistance. The presence of missionaries contributed to a broader dialogue on religion and social issues, influencing Indian thinkers and reformers. In response to both British influence and internal challenges, various reform movements emerged, such as the Brahmo Samaj and Arya Samaj. These groups sought to modernize Hinduism by rejecting practices like caste discrimination and child marriage while promoting education and social equality. They played a crucial role in awakening social consciousness and challenging orthodoxy. Simultaneously, the rise of an Indian middle class, educated, urban, and politically aware, sparked a cultural renaissance. Literature, arts, and political activism flourished as Indians began to reclaim and reinterpret their heritage, blending traditional values with modern ideas. This cultural awakening laid important groundwork for India's eventual quest for independence and self-identity. The rise of Indian nationalism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries marked the beginning of a collective effort to challenge British colonial rule. One of the earliest and most influential political organizations was the Indian National Congress, founded in 1885. Initially, the Congress aimed to seek greater participation for Indians within the British administration. Through peaceful dialogue and reform, key leaders helped shape this growing movement. Dadabhai Naoroji, known as the Grand Old Man of India, exposed the economic drain caused by British policies. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was a more radical voice, advocating for self-rule and inspiring mass mobilization. Gopal Krishna Gokhale represented moderate reformism, emphasizing constitutional methods and dialogue with the British. Tensions escalated with the British decision to partition Bengal in 1905, seen by many as a divide-and-rule tactic to weaken Indian unity. The partition sparked widespread outrage and led to the Swadeshi movement, which encouraged Indians to boycott British goods and revive indigenous industries. This movement marked a significant shift toward more direct and assertive resistance. Alongside constitutional efforts, revolutionary movements also emerged, with groups willing to use more militant tactics against colonial authorities. These varied approaches reflected the diversity and determination of Indian nationalism, setting the stage for the decades-long struggle for independence. Mahatma Gandhi's return to India in 1915 marked a new era in the country's freedom struggle. Bringing his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, or satyagraha, Gandhi quickly became a central figure in mobilizing millions of Indians against British rule. His early activism emphasized unity across religions and castes, appealing to people from all walks of life. One of Gandhi's first major campaigns was the non-cooperation movement, 1920-22, urging Indians to boycott British goods, schools, and courts to weaken colonial authority peacefully. Though the movement was suspended after some violent incidents, it galvanized widespread participation and awakened political consciousness across the nation. In 1930, Gandhi launched the civil disobedience movement, famously leading the Salt March, a 240-mile trek to the Arabian Sea to produce salt in defiance of British salt taxes. This act of peaceful defiance captured global attention and inspired millions to break unjust laws, further challenging British legitimacy. The struggle intensified during World War II with the Quit India movement of 1942, a mass protest demanding an immediate end to British rule. Despite severe crackdowns and arrests, this movement demonstrated Indian resolve and set the stage for independence. Alongside Gandhi, other leaders played vital roles. Jawaharlal Nehru emerged as a visionary modern leader and India's first prime minister. Subhas Chandra Bose took a more militant approach, leading the Indian National Army to fight the British with foreign alliances. Bhagat Singh became a symbol of revolutionary sacrifice, inspiring youth with his bold acts against colonial oppression. Together, these diverse efforts wove the rich tapestry of India's freedom struggle. During World War II, India played a crucial role by supplying troops, resources, and raw materials to support the British war effort. Over 2 million Indian soldiers served abroad, making it one of the largest volunteer forces in the conflict. However, the war severely strained British resources and weakened their hold over the empire, accelerating demands for Indian self-rule. At the same time, political divisions within India deepened. The All India Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, increasingly pressed for a separate nation, Pakistan, claiming that Muslims needed their own state to protect their rights. This demand challenged the vision of a united India championed by the Indian National Congress. In 1942, the British government sent the Cripps mission to negotiate constitutional reforms and Indian cooperation in the war, but the offer fell short of Indian demands for full independence and was ultimately rejected, heightening tensions. The 1946 provincial elections further exposed the deep communal divisions between Hindus and Muslims. The Muslim League's electoral success in Muslim-majority areas strengthened calls for partition, while violence between communities escalated. These events set the stage for the end of the British Raj and the creation of two independent nations in 1947, amid widespread turmoil and displacement. The final chapter of the British Raj unfolded with the Mountbatten Plan of 1947, which laid out the framework for India's independence and the partition of British India into two separate nations, India and Pakistan. As negotiations intensified, it became clear that religious divisions between Hindus and Muslims were too deep to reconcile within a single country, leading to the creation of Pakistan as a separate homeland for Muslims. The partition triggered one of the largest and most tragic mass migrations in history. Millions of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs were forced to flee their homes amid horrific communal violence that swept across the newly drawn borders. This violence claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and left millions displaced, marking a deeply painful and traumatic beginning for both nations. Despite the immense challenges, both India and Pakistan emerged from the shadow of colonial rule as independent states, carrying forward legacies shaped by British governance. The British Raj left a lasting impact on political institutions, legal systems, infrastructure, and social structures in both countries. However, the scars of partition and colonial exploitation also influenced their early years, shaping their national identities and relations for decades to come. The British Raj was a complex and transformative period that left a profound and lasting impact on India. It reshaped the country's political landscape, introduced modern infrastructure and institutions, and sparked social and cultural change. Yet, it also brought economic exploitation, social divisions, and widespread suffering, including the trauma of partition. Reflecting on this era helps us understand the roots of many challenges and achievements in modern India today. If you found this exploration of the British Raj insightful, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating stories.